Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Caderna podcast. I'm your host, Brian Caderna. In today's episode, I'll be interviewing Stephen Benedict. But before we get there, I just want to remind everyone to please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you're listening or watching. That's a huge help as we continue to spread the word on the Caderna podcast. So, Stephen Benedict, let me give you a quick breakdown or bio for those of you who might not be familiar. Stephen Benedict is a professional track and field athlete who faced more obstacles before the age of 28 than most people would face in a lifetime. Growing up with his brother as foster children and then tragically losing their beloved adoptive parents after college, their youth was a tumultuous one, to say the least. Stephen embraced the lessons he learned along the way on the track and used them throughout life as a successful entrepreneur, a pro athlete, corporate speaker, and philanthropist. Some of Stephen's athletic accomplishments include ranking 20th in the nation in the 200 meter, winning the Penn Relays championship in the 4x100, and qualifying for this year's Olympic trials for Team USA in June at 40 years old. He also trains other elite athletes, such as the NFL players preparing for the combine. Stephen has graced the cover of several athletic magazines and is a corporate speaker on leadership, social emotional awareness, and human optimization. His goal is to pave the way for future generations, setting examples of how incredible achievements through unwavering strength and faith can be accomplished, regardless of where one may begin their journey. You could check out Steve on his website or through his social media links, which I'll be sure to put in the show notes. But without further ado, here's Stephen Benedict.
Is going to require work and time and sweat and toil.
If money wasn't an issue, what would I be doing?
Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out.
Change is the only constant.
The Caderna Podcast.
Steve, welcome to the show.
How are we doing, Brian? Thank you for having me.
Good, man. Yeah, I appreciate you joining us from the West Coast. I know it's early your time. But we can get right into it here. I know you're quite a runner. When did you first get into it? Were you one of those kids that was just born racing everybody that they knew?
I think that I definitely was gifted with running and athletics. Definitely athletically inclined, but sports didn't really come into the frame until I was probably like 11, 12-ish or so. And that was just because sports and school and all that stuff weren't really on the radar. Before that, my life was pretty insecure and unstable in a lot of situations. But in that space, athletics has always been a cornerstone for me and has always been a foundation for me, and has been a platform in which I've been able to utilize in a lot of different ways to not only for my story, but also to impact others and to also give me that space as an outlet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that's a real big piece of your story is kind of your starting point. So maybe just as a launch pad here to kind of introduce to all our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and those early years, kind of how these things started before you became the athlete that you are?
Yeah, sure. Rewinding things, I guess back to the beginning of things. I was born on the East Coast, moved up and down around the East Coast a lot, very unstable, unstable and abusive situations. I was put into foster care at a very young age at 4 months, and then not too long after that, I was put back into her hands. My brother was born, and my father had passed at a very young age for us. And so I have no recollection. I don't even know what my father looks like. That's a big question mark in my past. But moving forward, as I said, my mother was dating another man, and pretty much he sought fit to kind of abuse us and beat us up at his leisure as an outlet. I was hospitalized. We were living in and out of motel rooms, very unstable situations, neglect. And my grandparents had found out about it. and they decided to take us in for a very short period of time, knowing that having two toddlers was unsustainable for them at their age in order to be able to take care of properly. So we wound up going back into foster care. Bounced around the East Coast for several years, from home to home. And at the ages of 8 and 6, so roughly about 6 years through the foster care system, living in and out of different homes and different families. The latter part of our experience in the foster care system was more permanent. It was roughly the last 2.5 years or so. And then we were blessed to be adopted by two great individuals. My mother was a second grade teacher, and she had taught English to Japanese students, but also very profound in the community. Everybody knew her. The mayor wanted her on her board. She was very bold and very outspoken, involved in everything. And then my father, on the other half, he was ex-Vietnam vet in the Marines, then moved on to work on New York Stock Exchange for Merrill Lynch. So we had a very good dynamic in the household. My father, I say, was always like the joy of life. Everybody, he had a white beard. Everybody had thought he was like Santa Claus or asked him to be Santa Claus around Christmas time. Had that Kenny Rogers look. But then my mother, on the other hand, she was kind of the bold Italian, ruled with the iron fist type of approach, was involved in everything of us, super protective. So the dynamic in the house was totally different from what we grew up in, where there was no protectiveness, there was no protection, there was no sustainability, there was no stability. There's a lot of different things for us. And then also in that space, there was a lot of time where there had to be trust built on our part and their part. We're new to them, they're new to us. We haven't been in a family situation for a very long time. So me being the oldest, I had a lot of walls that needed to be brought down, trust and love and just listening and being able to speak and having a space of security and safety. So there was a lot. So in that first 10 years,
Just to hop in there, Steve, out of curiosity, was that a foster to adopt situation with your mom and dad, or had they kind of come out of left field and said, we'd like to adopt these two brothers?
No, they came out of left field. We were the foster family that we were with was totally separate. So they were foster parents, and we had two stepsisters and a stepbrother. So, for my brother, the dynamic was different too. It's just in that period of time, it was just them visiting us for a period of time and them kind of getting to know us, and we had thought they were friends of the family. That's what we were told for security reasons and things. And then things developed as the relationship got more, and we found out that they wanted to adopt us.
Wow, that's an excellent transition there. How old were you when your parents then entered the picture?
Finally, we were 8 and 6. My brother was 6, I was 8. Yeah. So,
okay. All right. So still relatively young. I mean, you haven't gotten into middle school or high school or anything like that yet.
No, we haven't gotten into middle school or high school or anything. So, and our education was lacking a little bit. We were a little behind. Rightfully so. So.
And did it all of a sudden kind of like flip a switch where now they adopted you and you more or less entered kind of like a warm, welcome household and kind of like a normal kid's life at that point?
That's a great question. And I do remember, and I do say that all the time, is that our welcoming into the family was a very smooth transition into that fact that they were very open-armed. From my cousins to my aunts and uncles and my grandparents, it was they had an adoption party for us and everything. So it was a very warm welcoming, but again, there was a lot of still things happening in transition that were kind of natural to me in the sense of having my guard up in certain things. And also for my brother too, it was very hard for him because the transition was he was younger. And I, being the eldest, had absorbed most of the impact from the past situations of abuse and all that things, and was very protective of him. So I had to build certain characteristics in a child that you don't build until you're later older in life, resiliency, self-sufficiency, protectiveness, things like that, right? The things that I had no business of trying to take on and really had no parameter of really instilling in that. So in that space, it was different. I was very quiet and very aware and aware of my surroundings. My brother was very belligerent. He had thought that my adopted parents kind of took him away from our parents that were in foster care, which he, being there for a very prolonged period of time, he thought that, that was our home. And that's where we were building our home. So it was kind of an uprooting again, which that seemed to be the consistency in our story for a while.
Yeah, I imagine it had to kind of feel like, even though you settled into the smooth transition, that it could be temporary. Did like your parents at that time, I would imagine they really tried to impress upon you that this is it, like stop worrying, like this is going to be it. Did you feel that way, or was it just inevitable that every night you thought, it could just go away?
I think in the beginning that was a natural path of thought and approach to life, is like, okay, how long is this going to last? When do we punch the ticket here and move on to the next place? Because that's been what has been consistent for us, right? And that's what we've known, and that's what kind of life has taught us, right? Yeah. Stay here for a while, move on to the next place. Stay here for a while, move on to the next place. So the consistency factor was definitely a question, but they did a really good job in letting us know that this is home, this is final, there is no next stop. And they did that by just just constantly having that put at the forefront for us, and showing the things of love and acceptedness and having family vacations and being involved in our life, and getting us involved in other things that were sustainable for us, like education, music, and art, and sports, all of these things, and community. And my mother was very good at that.
That's great. That's such I know it's not the end of the story, but it's almost a happy ending of that phase, because I know it doesn't always go that way.
Right.
And so when, I know you're a professional athlete, like when did sports enter the mix? Did that become kind of like that safe haven that it is for so many people, that you could always count on it? You go out to the track, what's there, like when did you start to feel that, like that was your happy place? Or was it not that way? Did it take time to get like that?
It definitely took time to get to that point. Now it's definitely whenever I go to the stadium to train, it's definitely an outlet for me, and it's definitely a place of like meditation and just release and separation from the busyness and craziness of the world. But it started off, the first sport we got into was martial arts. So I did judo for 10 years, which
cool. That's
I'll
awesome.
probably be transitioning back into as my next sport. But that was my foundation in that space of athletics. And I have to say that the greatest thing from that from where we came from, the amount of stability and discipline and structure that we learned in that space was, I can't say enough about how I think that most kids should go into that type of structure first if they are going into sports, because they do learn they're in that type of environment. martial arts teaches that space of discipline and just respect and honor and understanding being in an environment of teaching and absorbing and listening and cues, like all those very foundational things that translate into every other sport across.
Sure.
So that was super beneficial for me and super beneficial for my brother. And then we transitioned into other things. Then I played football. Baseball, soccer, track, obviously. But football and track became the two big things for a very long time. I played football all the way through high school. And
was it
then,
the same for your brother too? Like, was he just kind of a natural athlete and that's what the two of you did, or were you opposites in some respects?
We were opposites in some respects. We're built differently. He's a little more huskier than I am. He's a bit taller than I am. And I'm a bit shorter than he is, but a bit more agile in the space of running and flexibility and things like that. So our body types are different. He was very big in baseball, so he was a pitcher in baseball. So that was kind of his sport that drew him. And then for me, it was, track and field and football for the most part. And
Gotcha.
The track coach had found me on the football field. So that's kind of how that whole evolution had happened.
Got it. Like at this stage, as we're kind of like taking a bit of a tour here through your upbringing, like when did you start thinking about the next step, whether it was going to be college or athletics or what have you? And what did you want to do? Like, did you ever have kind of like an epiphany of like, hey, this is what I want to do the rest of my life? Or was it more just trial and error, just year by year by year?
Well, along the way, there was a lot of trial and error. I felt like I was running on a lot of natural talent. And when I look back at it in hindsight, I could have done so much more, especially through my high school years. But as I said, I was running on a lot of natural talent, and I got exposed to a very big, broadened space of running internationally, which is very rare to do. So in that space, it was kind of like you get that athlete bug of, okay, now you're in high school and everybody's looking at you as the athlete, and you get that senioritis type feel of everything, and you don't work as hard, and you're running on talent, and you're just kind of like getting by, but you're getting by at a higher level than everybody else, right? So by the time my high school career was on the tail end, my senior year, I was ready to do some really good things throughout the year, county championships and things like that. But then again, was still playing the athlete role and did some kind of not so smart things. Played basketball the day before my league championships and wound up coming down and twisting my ankle, and it swelled up, and I wound up having to pull out of the league championships, which my coach was furious about. I still remember it to this day.
I can imagine.
And that whole high school year was a really kind of tough year in the sense that I really needed to put in a lot more work in order to get to that next level, from transitioning to high school to college. And then obviously, the next levels are college to pro. And you really don't.
Highly recruited at that time? Like
I had a lot of scholarships on the board. Had a lot of different schools from the West Coast to East Coast, and then the South that I was all talking to. And
you ran the 100 and 200?
I ran the 100 and 200 at that particular time. I also ran the 4x4 and the 4x1. So I was kind of a workhorse. I did the pole vault in high school.
Really? That's always been a scary one.
I was actually one of the county champions.
Really?
Pole vault.
That's awesome.
I had seen one of my friends. He was really good. Go up and snap a pole at like 13 feet in the air and hit the floor, and I was like, I'm done. So I stuck to the track.
Yeah, keep your feet on the ground at that point.
Exactly.
And did you have, because I know like a lot of kids, a lot of athletes, especially high level ones, you're playing different sports. Did you ever think about, hey, I want to go back to playing football, or I want to focus on this, that, or the other? Or, did track just take over and you saw that's where the future was?
No, football was definitely on my radar. And there was a happening in my senior year that I didn't play my senior year because my mother did not like football. And this is a kind of an inside story that hasn't been told in a while, but my mother, this is what I said, my mother was involved in everything and she ruled with an iron fist, is that there was always prerequisites with her of when we were in high school. If we wanted to play football, because it was a very, impactful sport, and you get hurt in it, and she didn't want us to get involved in it, but she knew that was something that we liked to do, especially myself. And my father was, pro for it. So one of her prerequisites for us was that if you want to play football, then you have to be in the band. So music, right? So all through my high school. Yeah, all through my high school years, and it started in my middle school year. I was in music, so I played the saxophone for quite a while. I was in a jazz band in high school. I hated every moment of it. But I have to say, it definitely was a piece that made me more diversified. Made me more well-rounded, put me in a different space of being uncomfortable, but then. But my mother was involved in that. She was involved in the band community and all that aspect. So long story short, she had said that, we have to be in the band if we want to play football. So you can imagine that I'm on the football team and I'm, on the varsity team, even when I was freshman, sophomore. But when the team goes in for halftime and they go into a locker room, and then the band comes out on the field to play. Yeah. I don't go in with the football team. I stay out on the football field
Get out of here.
And in order to play. So like those things would drive me nuts. And then my senior year, this is the nuts and bolts of that story, is that I really wanted to play football. I didn't play my junior year because the coach was and the team was just very underwhelming. And so I focused on track. But I said, I want to play my senior year in order to transition into college as another option in sports as well. She said, okay, well, and I didn't want to be in the band. And I said, well, the deal we have, you have to play this and that, and in order to play this. And I said, no, my father, he got behind me on it. He said, just let him do it. It's his senior year. My mother wouldn't have it. So first day of practice, I'm headed up. My dad was like, just go to practice whenever. First day of practice, I'm headed up to the football field, get to the field. My coaches are waiting on. They're excited to have me. But then I can see their faces as I walk up to them and said, hey, we can't let you play. And I was like, why? It's like, your mother had came about an hour before you and said that if we let you play, that she would take this to the board of education, whatever. And she was in the educational board within that school. So everybody knew her. So they didn't mess with her. Needless to say, it didn't happen. I didn't play because she went ahead and kind of got there before me, laid down the ground rules for them, and they were just not having it. So, tough. It was definitely a cut deep that year.
Yeah.
But I did focus on my other sports. But again, like I said,
was there some resentment from that of like, that was something you really wanted and then boom, you missed that opportunity?
Yeah, it was a heartbreaking moment for me, and I had a lot of resentment. We had a huge blowout about it. I look at a lot of situations in that space in which she was really involved and sometimes overbearingly involved. But when you take that into consideration and then how things are run nowadays and the world as it is now, I was really blessed to have somebody such an advocate for me and so defensive for me and protective for me,
Sure.
coming from the place in which I came from, where there was none at all. So I'd like to say, yes, it was the extreme side of things,
Yeah.
and I would have liked to maybe have a happy medium, but I probably, in this case, or in that time period of my life, what it instilled in me and the feelings that I have around it. Yes, there was some resentment. Yes, I wanted to do the thing that I loved and wanted to do that. But I know that her heart was in the right place for it, and just wanted, just really wanted the best for me in that space. And we don't know what the best is all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And growing up the way that you did, I know it's easy now looking back to say, hey, you know, I prefer the overbearing side that you had with your mom versus obviously the earlier part of your childhood. Did you have kind of that frame of reference then in the moment when you're 17, 18 years old? Or was it kind of like short-term memory where that past was a distant past and now you were just pissed off you couldn't play football?
Yeah, the past was definitely a different past. You know, you're in the moment.
Yeah, that's what I
think-
figure. I mean, a kid is a kid.
Yeah, a kid is a kid at that point. I wasn't thinking about my past. I wasn't thinking about my adoption. I was thinking of, I'm an athlete. This is what I'm, bred to do. This is what I want to do, and you've taken this from.
Yeah.
And it hurt, and it became, and I'm because of my upbringing, I'm a very bold and very kind of gung-ho type person in that space. Is like, okay, well, I'm not going to turn down from a fight.
Yeah.
It became a battle, and we clashed heads in many spaces in that, in that time, because my mother was very bold and very stubborn, Italian stubborn, and so it was a constant clash between the two of us in many situations. She wanted me to do it her way. I wanted to do it my way.
Yeah, but it's all for the better.
Right.
And so I have a question kind of fast forwarding almost to like the present day. And I know we'll get into a lot of, the feats you had in college and thereafter, but do you do any coaching?
I do. I do have some private athletes that I do coach. It is very time consuming, so I'm very selective of the athletes that I do take on. Because I am very, I get very involved from their nutrition standpoint to their recovery standpoints to their program design. I've trained NFL athletes, getting them ready for their combine, to national track athletes, college athletes, getting them ready, and also high school athletes transitioning into the college level. So, but I haven't, it is on the radar, and I have asked to coach for colleges, but I don't know if that's a space in which I'm really desiring. So
gotcha. What's just to bring us up to speed, what's a day like in your life? What are you doing now? I know you have a lot going on, but it's not like you're out to pasture with sports, so you're not just in that space, but obviously you're not in college doing any of that anymore. What are you doing right now?
Actually, I'm training for my last games. I'm training for my last Olympic trials, which will be in June.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So this will be my last one, and going back and forth with my doctors and making sure that I'm healthy. I had a little bit of an injury, but they've been great. We were on a super aggressive protocol, got me back on my feet within 6 weeks. And so getting ready to open up my season sometime this month in some low-key meets, and then push through May. And then end of June, or the beginning of June, I'll head back over to Europe, which I'll be competing all across Europe on the international circuit.
And then when are the actual trials? Is that like a one-day event you show up to and all boils down to that?
Trials will be the end of June, and it'll be, you have qualifying standards for that, but then for that it's several rounds. It'll be depending on the amount of athletes that'll be there, 2 or 3 rounds before finals, and the team will be allotted from there.
Do you know exactly what you need to hit to make it? Are the times pretty well known? And if so, are you there? What's it looking like?
Qualifying times to get there, no problem. And then it's just about competing on that day. And
Yeah.
You really want to be in the top three to secure a space.
Yep.
And also to be, whether it be, a singular approach towards the games, whether you're running the 200 by yourself or open, or you're going to run be an alternate on one of the relays or whatnot.
Okay.
So right now, my main concern is quality over quantity through my training sessions, making sure I'm getting a deep recovery so that I can get that quality of a workout, and staying healthy, keeping my mindset together, keeping the right people around me, and then just taking one practice and one race at a time. And
Are
seeing
you
what
doing
shows
the
up.
1 and the 2, or are you just going for one of them?
No, just the 200. Just the
Okay.
200 is going to be my focus. I'm going to be running some open 400s soon, just for some strength work and just to get my legs moving in some races, and then dial back to the 200.
Gotcha. And how do you feel? Like, I always was taught growing up and then even playing football in college and stuff, that speed is just talent, that speed isn't taught. You don't go out and work at it and get faster. Like they always said, you could get quicker, you could get more coordinated, but just speed, you either had it or you didn't. What's your take on that? Because I know you're busting your butt now to qualify, and you see a guy like a Usain Bolt or someone that it just seems like, hey, if this guy doesn't even work that hard, he could just go out and fly just because he can. Like, what's your take on that? What are you doing? And do you feel like you can really move the needle with what you're doing right now?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it kind of peels back the curtain on some of the things behind the scenes. Is that it doesn't matter how much talent you have, and Bolt had great amount of talent. He had great genetics. So I think a lot of sprinters have great genetics. You have to,
Sure.
and you have to be willing to put in the work. There's a lot of work. So you figure on any given week, you're training 20, 25 hours a week for a 20-second race.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right? So the numbers are ridiculous, but then you also have to take into consideration program design and what works best for you and where you're at in your career. As athletes get older, or some athletes, depending on their genetics and their work threshold, can maintain a higher threshold of workout, right?
Yeah.
Or they can bounce back from it. And some need a deeper recovery period.
Yeah.
So you got to really, and that comes with experience, right? That comes with experience of training and understanding coaching and understanding your athletic ability and where you are at now and how much time you put in predisposed situations, right? Or so like earlier in my career, I was training, an unsurmountable amount of time, maybe like 6 days a week. Now I'm, the training regimen and the program design is totally different. Now it's like, okay, more is not more. Right?
Yeah.
We get that kind of mixed up. We think like we hear from all these like motivational speakers, and everybody else is like, "Oh, no days off, and do this, and keep pushing even when you're tired and you're hurt and everything." Yes, to a certain extent, yes, there is a space in which you need to be able to push through lactic threshold because your body will be able to bounce back and understand, okay, now we've got that much more. But when you're starting to compromise things of your own athletic ability and your own technical aspects of things, that's when things like injuries and things come about.
Yeah.
So
if you don't mind, how old are you right now?
40.
Okay. All right. So this is like the last hurrah, right?
Yeah.
Suffice it to say. And if you could kind of, like you were saying, peel back the curtain a little bit. I know a lot of our listeners, especially athletes, are going to love this. What is it like your ratio of maybe lifting? I know you see that a lot more now, especially in shorter distance, your sprinters, versus actual work on the track versus that rest, because that's so critical. Like, how is that maybe in a normal week? How's that broken up?
So right now for me, the period goes with my coaches, it goes high, low, low. So we'll come in some Monday, super high day. It'll be a double day. I'll be on the track. doing, so like this past Monday, on the track, I had, 3 times 150 meters with a 11-pound weight vest on, for, build-up reps.
Okay.
That was a walk back. So that's 3 of those, and then strip the weight vest off. And then I had 6 times 200 meters, roughly in like 26 pace with a short recovery of walk back. And then on the back end of that, I had another 4 times 40 meters on the field, just working on fast twitch and just push out drive face and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
That was my morning session. And then in the evening, I was in the gym. And the gym right now is all not heavyweight. It's all elastic movements. So you figure I had like an iso hold movement. So a squat hold for like 20 seconds, with a hex bar deadlift. So I was down in a squat position, holding it with probably about 135 pounds, holding it in an isometric position for 20 seconds, and then followed that up by squat jumps off of a mat. So you're working that kind of contrast of elasticity in the muscle fibers in order to get that explosiveness. So that'll be Monday. That's what a Monday will look like. And then Thursday will be my next heavy day. So tomorrow will be another full high volume day. So more speed development tomorrow, and then followed by another elastic training session.
Gotcha.
Then
and do you get a day off? Like,
so today's my day off.
Okay. Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect time. So today is my day off. Yesterday was a down day. I had some cardio work in the morning, and then I did a 30-minute pool run in the evening. And then today off, and then back tomorrow, high volume, and then another lower volume on Friday. And then Saturday, Sunday, I'll recover, come back on Monday. So this period of time, as we're getting into the race preparation of things, it's all about the quality of the work, right? How fast are we being able to move the needle? How fast are we being able to keep pushing those times in a consistent pace that our body understands that, okay, this is the pace we need to maintain, and then we need to push the needle a little further.
Yeah. And like right now, is it just habit? Like, you've been doing it so long, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this is what you got going on? Or do you kind of like mentally shut off and then you just follow your coaches and trainers? And so you're just kind of like showing up there in body, I'm just going to go for it. Or are you talking through the workout? Like, what, I want to do one more sprint, or I want to cut it out early today. Like, do you have that input and that back and forth, or are you just following the program to the T?
No, I'm constantly having that self-awareness, and you have to, as an athlete, you have to be super self-aware. You don't just go in there like all willy-nilly and be like, okay, this is what's on the plate. Yes, this is the workout that is adhered by for today. That's what we're trying to implement. And you have to be flexible enough in that space to understand and be wise enough as an athlete at a very high level to understand, like, okay, I got through this rep. I'm working on my cues through this rep, working on my breathing through my nose, making sure I'm staying in my pocket when I'm running, as far as like my leg cycles, my arms are relaxed. Like all these things are constantly going on. It's not just like we're out there running, like, and we're getting reminded by our coaches as well, right? Like, stay relaxed, drop your shoulders, get up tall, keep your feet up underneath you, like those types of things, all things that will prevent like injury. But then again, you have to be vocal enough in that space. And this is where it comes into the space of, you get that athlete mentality where it's like, okay, push through. But then you also have to be very body aware of like, okay, this doesn't feel right. And it's forcing me to compensate in some way, shape, or form, which will then lead to eventually an injury. So you need to be able to cut that off and be like, okay, hey coach, this is what's happening. My calf is like tightening or whatever. or a smart coach will see some imbalances start to happen in a latter rep. If an athlete starts to get tired and they start to try to strain in order to get a stronger stride length, or their legs start to cast out, which is what we call a cast out. It goes out of the pocket of where their sweet spot is in order to implement power into the ground. Those are telltale signs that that form is declining, and we need to back off and we need to cut the workout.
Got it.
And
are
that's
you
injury prevention.
Are you running on a team at this stage, or is it just you with coaches and trainers like saying we're following Steve, period, he's our only concern?
I do have other guys that are around me that I train with. I wouldn't say it's a team per se. I have a club that I run for overseas in Europe. But here it's kind of training camps. Is what we call them, right? Like everybody kind of is training on an individual program, but they're training as a camp, so their programs are similar. So you have training partners, but they're all either, you could have people from other countries training in that camp, and they're training for their team as well as you're training for your team. Right.
Yeah,
so,
you can that. And even you see it a lot of NFL athletes where it's like they lose that step when they hit 30. It's like they hit a wall. Have you felt that, or are you feeling like you are still improving even now at 40 versus the way that your body was taking off at 20?
There are some nuances, yes. I'm not going to lie. There are definitely some nuances as far as aches and pains and things like that. But again, that becomes things that you become smart about. And then it's like, okay, well, I need to look at my training load. And it just becomes a sense of going back to the space of quality over quantity, and getting the most out of where you are. And if you need a deeper recovery, then you take it. Because in the end, all that matters is that, are you running fast enough, right? Are you being able to bounce back from that? And the body is very resilient, especially if you take care of it, not only on a physical level, but mentally, and then also internally as well. So there's a whole different aspect internally too. If you're taking well of your internals, as far as your organs and your heart health and your blood work, I get blood work done every probably month and a half, 2 months, to make sure my hormones are balanced and that my red blood cell count is in good parameters. My testosterone is okay. My energy's like, all these things are intact for me to be able to have the greatest opportunity to perform on a daily basis. And what I have found is that some of the more seasoned athletes that have been in the sport for a long period of time, especially sprinters, and sprinters have been able to prolong their career lately over the past years longer and longer because of those types of protocols that they have taken, and be smart in that space. I mean, there's been guys like Kim Collins, who ran for Kits and Caicos, who was running sub 10 seconds at age 42. So
that's insane. That's crazy. So
the possibilities are endless. And you've seen it in football too. You've seen these guys, that are like 45. Still playing.
You got your Tom Brady's out there.
Right, Tom Brady's. Right. And again, I think it becomes a sense of, yes, does the athletic ability start to hinder you? Can your body still take? Because there is a lot of pounding in sprinting. You're doing a lot of explosive work over years and years and years of it, and impact on the ground, and just keeping that elasticity becomes very tough. But you can do it, and it's also a desire too. Once you lose the desire, I think the other things start to kind of slide down the slippery slope.
Sure. And so, I mean, if you can maybe, we keep going back to the phrase kind of peeling back the curtain, but I think that's what's so unique about this. when we look at track and field, it's not something like the NFL or the NBA where these guys can, they get their contract and they're set. They can go pursue whatever they want the rest of the year outside of their sport, or even if they have a 4-year career, they could be set for life. With track, obviously, it's a little bit different. What's like your year like? I know right now you're in full track mode, for the games, but what are some of the other things? I know you're an author, and I've seen you speak at a lot of different things. How do you kind of weave all this together? I mean, are you trying to become kind of like a brand? Is that how it's done in your field, or what's going through your mind? What's like the end goal?
Yeah, and that seems to be an ongoing question that I've been asked. I was just speaking about it yesterday, is that one of the things that I have noticed about this sport is that, like you said, there is no contract kind of salary cap type of implement where you have the team and then they have contracts and you're under the team's hub and everything. And it's very structured in that space. Once you go pro, it's like, okay, hey, either you have an agent doing the due diligence for you and trying to pull in those things, or you're sitting back and you're waiting in order to have a company find you, or in some way, shape, or form, which doesn't work at all, right? Yeah. And our sport is very based on numbers, and either you're running times that will put you at the cream of the crop, and companies will come find you if you're running consistently, where you're collecting medals and getting that hardware, which is few and far, or you have a great story, you have accomplished a lot in your career, and then you go the route that which I have seen and felt like, and I preach to other athletes in my space because I've seen it nonstop. They all sit there and they don't know which way to go. They don't know, how to kind of get things subsidized and get some financial security in that space, because they are putting long training hours in, and it's impossible to pretty much have a 9 to 5 and be able to train at such a high level. So you have to be diverse, right? And luckily enough, when I went to college for graphic design and marketing, which has been, a huge piece in what I do now and how I have conversations with other companies. But my story is a big piece of what I do, and I intertwine everything in making sure that everything is on the same wavelength and nothing is just jumping off on a different tangent. You see some type of athletes that go totally left field. It doesn't make sense with their brand or who they are. So I'm very adamant about doing that. And when I speak to companies, this is how I approach them. I approach them in the sense of that, yes, I am an athlete. This is one piece of who I am. It does have a platform in which things can be a catalyst off of, but these are the other pieces that complement that and give you a greater ROI. And this is why you need me for your company. And this is why a partnership between the two of us will be that much more beneficial. So things like, I have my athletic arm and I have my business arm, and then I have my charity arm, right? So all those things are pieces of who I am, but the story is really not about me. It's how I kind of go out into the world and impact the world and kind of make a difference in my space, and from a very humanistic standpoint, showing that I think connecting with people on an emotional level, because the emotional piece is a universal language, in which I think we can all kind of relate to, of loss and abandonment and fear and anxiety and striving and love and all those things. Is that I use those pieces and I use them from my standpoint and hopefully try to translate that to companies. And it's been very impactful, and also having a good filter of who I can represent and who I can really partner with long-term, organically, and make a difference, and not only have a paycheck on the back end, but also know that, hey, I appreciate my partners and my partnerships that I have, because they allow me to continue to do the things that I love. So I go over above and beyond in order to bring value back to them.
Got it. Got it. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, because as you're sharing some of this story, I was thinking of a movie we just saw, King Arthur. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's awesome. You should check it out. It's a Mark Wahlberg movie, but he's they're not ultra marathons. It's like these extreme endurance races that they do, I think in Costa Rica.
Okay.
And the money isn't huge in that, but then it's all about going out and getting the sponsors. They have to have one guy on the relay team that they don't really like, but they invite him because he's got 1 million Instagram followers, and they're kind of like playing this all together. So with that in mind, I mean, do you have one of these kind of silos of your brand or your business that's taking the lead, whether it's sponsorships, the corporate speaking gigs, the books, or the actual just raw track and trying to go out and get medals and checks? Do you find kind of one almost like leads the way?
Oh gosh, unfortunately, I feel like this day and age, social media does.
Really? Yeah.
But again, I really am adamant about the content that I do put out, and make sure that it's valuable. But in that same manner of speaking, I believe that only speaks so many volumes in this space, is that it's more of an outlet of a door being open to start a conversation for me. I don't rely on it in any sense. And I always circle back and cross-pollinate in everything else that I do, whether it be my book. And, so like the book that I published in November, which is National World Adoption Month. And I specifically published it during that, and I gave all the proceeds to aging out youth and families during that Christmas for a more sustainable holiday. So, so I do these things in the space of not always wanting to receive, but always being able to build the value that I bring. And I think that by doing that, like I think the approach has been for some athletes is that, hey, I'm an athlete and I've competed at this level, so I deserve this.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for us, one of, for me, a scripture that I hold near and dear to my heart is that it says that and that is something that I keep at the forefront of myself. And that is something that is of value to me, is that I'm very adamant about bringing value to other people's lives. And I'm not always good at it, right? And I'm not always the greatest at it. But I think empathy and my story has allowed me to do that, because I've experienced so much in such a short period of time that I'm allowed, and then I'm able to step into other people's shoes and understand from their perspective, and then share pieces of myself, not in the space of comparing myself, but in a space of giving them a safe space to speak about their issues.
Sure. No, I think that's awesome. And to kind of tie all this together, which I know we've been doing in a bit of a roundabout way, but you have so many different hats that you wear here, that ultimately makes you an entrepreneur, which I think is great, because that's probably at the core of our audience here, not just business, but especially entrepreneurship. So as you're doing all these different things, can you maybe share a couple nuggets of information as far as the perseverance you had to have through your upbringing and your family life, the things in track and field, that you've been able to do, and then having to go out there and market yourself, like you were just talking about? Do you have just some things, like some principles that you always look back and say, hey, I remember this that I got through, or I remember that where this mentality or habit worked for me? Can you maybe share a couple insights there that make you a good entrepreneur right now?
Yeah. And again, I think it's been a lifelong journey, and it's going to continue to be. But definitely over the years, those things of due diligence, first and foremost, as an athlete or as anybody, I think trying to accomplish something at a high level, you have to believe in yourself. first and foremost. Yeah, because you're going into a field, you're going into a very volatile world, right? And there's always things that are downgrading us and putting and degrading us in a space of our self-worth and who we are, who we don't think we are because of social standards or society or whatever the case is. So that has been a key element for me, is to constantly reiterate myself and to affirm myself in spaces of believing in myself, believing that, yes, I've and to be able to reflect on the things that I have done from where I have come from. Right, that is a clear, and everybody has their story, and that has been a clear pathway for me. Is like when I get to that space of like, the needle isn't moving as fast as I want it to move.
Mhm.
I have to take some downtime and look over the kind of breadcrumb trail of where I've come from and all of the milestones along the way. And now I'm like, wow, you know what? I've come this far and I'm here. The future is very bright.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So believing in myself, embracing things like failure, knowing that it's going to come out, because if you're pushing any type of success or trying to push some type of success or a high marker, high standard, which other people are saying it's impossible, is know that you're going to have failure along the way, and being able to look at that failure and be like, okay, this could have been done better. Let's do it better on this. Like it's a trial and error. It's self-experimental along the way. So
yeah, I think that was a great point you made too, of almost like reminding yourself what you've done. Because I find that both in business and also in athletics, some really high performers, that they can be so hard on themselves. They look at today or the task in front of them and think like, oh, how could I ever do this? Or I'm not going to do it right. And then look back and it's like, dude, look at all the things you've done. Are you kidding me? I remember hearing an interview with GSP. If you know, George St. Pierre was a legend in MMA, maybe the best ever. And he was talking about things like, oh, I could never do that, or I would always get scared about X, Y, or Z. And it was like, how are you getting so much doubt? You're the greatest of all time. But it's like that can just kind of creep in. And I think that was kind of interesting too, to look back at that breadcrumb trail you said.
Yeah, I think it shows that we're all human, and we look at these athletes and we look at these movie stars and everybody, and we put them on these pedestals and think that they're above and beyond human qualities, but yet at the core of everything, we all battle the same things. And we just have to, we all need reassurance, right? We all need reassurance that we're all walking something very similar out. It's just different stories and different paths. And if we can just take the time to kind of cross-pollinate into each other's stories of kind of uplifting aspects of, things like practicing gratitude. Right. That's another thing I've had to really learn to do, and have supportive people around me. That is super important for our growth and our knowledge. So these are all things that help me persist in, I guess, like the face of adversity.
That's awesome. And this has been great, Steve. And I would be remiss if we didn't include what many listeners consider the best part of my show, which is the lightning round. So if we can hop in there, I'll just fire some questions at you, get to know Stephen Benedict a little bit better.
Okay.
And then you just tell us the first thing that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you have a quote that you live by?
Quote that I live by. I guess that scripture that I mentioned has been my cornerstone right now. Is those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted.
Love it. And do you have a favorite book?
Favorite book? The Alchemist.
Oh, I love it. That's another good one. I've got that somewhere back here on the bookshelf. Yeah. What about a favorite movie?
Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory.
Another good one. The original or the new one?
I saw the original was my favorite, and then I just saw the new one. I really loved the new one, what they did with it. I wasn't too happy with the ones in between, like the Johnny Depp one, but
Yeah.
the latest one was great. Yeah.
Yep. And I always think it's important to start the day on the right foot. Do you have a morning routine that you follow?
Yes, I do. First thing I do in the morning is that I go on my couch in the living room and I read through scripture, and then I have my journal next to me, and I write down the things that I'm grateful for. I have a few prayers for myself, a few prayers for my wife, and then write down some affirmations on myself of where I'm at right now, and the belief piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. And if you could look back and tell your younger self one thing, what would you tell him?
That that there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations, but on the back end of everything, that your greatest days are yet to come.
Okay. And you've traveled a lot in your career, obviously. What's your favorite destination or vacation?
Gosh, I'd have to say I spend a lot of time in Italy, and it's such a beautiful country. There's so many different aspects to it, from north to south. So I'd have to say the south of Italy, Amalfi Coast area.
Okay, yeah, it's beautiful. Positano around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you have a hero growing up? And if so, who was it?
My parents were my heroes.
Yeah.
My parents were my heroes.
That's great.
Yeah.
And last up, where can people find you? Anything else that you want to share with our listeners today so they can stay up to speed with everything you're doing?
Yeah, you can find most of my stuff on my website at www.stevieb.com. That's STEVIEYB.com. I have schedules up there. I have my threads, posts, and stuff, my social, some insights on charity work that I do. So it's all there encompassing, and it could lead you to other ways. And I'm an open book. So if there's any questions anybody has, whether it's in the performance space, health and longevity, or it's just, whether or in the foster care or reform space, I cover a lot, and there's no question is a wrong question for me. I'm open to answering anything.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time, Steve. This was really interesting and enlightening. I feel like we could probably go for another 2 hours, but maybe we'll have a round two at some point.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love the time. I appreciate your time, Brian.
Yeah, without a doubt. And everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Caderna podcast. Again, I'm your host, Brian Caderna. Today, we had the pleasure of speaking with Stephen Benedict. And wherever you're listening or watching, please leave a review. Be sure to click subscribe, and we will see you next time. And Steve, hopefully we'll be seeing you in the Olympics.
That is the plan.
All right. Well, best of luck, my friend.
Thank you.
This podcast is intended for the general public and for informational purposes only. The show does not provide any recommendations or investment advice regarding any specific account type, service, strategy, or product, or to otherwise act in any fiduciary or other capacity. Please contact a financial professional for guidance and information that is specific to your situation. Brian Caderna does not provide tax or legal advice. Please contact your accountant or legal advisor to discuss your situation. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Caderna Financial Team, and opinions stated are their own. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. References to specific securities, asset classes, and financial markets are for illustrative purposes only and do not constitute a solicitation, offer, or recommendation to purchase or sell a security. Brian Caderna is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. OSJ 300 Broadacres Drive, Suite 175, Bloomfield, New Jersey, 07003. Phone number 973-244-4420. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Caderna Financial Team is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. California Insurance License Number 0K04194.